Greetings, everyone, and welcome to my History channel. It's me. And today we're going to look back at the year 1785 and see what happened on this day, including an event that shaped the financial world forever. You know, it is kind of amazing to think that there was a time before the almighty dollar. In fact, when the United States first started out as a new country, its founders were very hesitant to establish a national currency. They didn't want a repeat of what had just happened with the British, where the king basically printed money like crazy to fund his wars, which devalued the currency and caused inflation. These coins were only used temporarily until the U.S. Mint could start producing its own coinage. The first coins produced by the mint were the half cent, the cent, the quarter, half-dollar and dollar coins. At the same time, the decimal system of currency was put into place. It really helps get this content out to more people and keeps my channel growing. In 1900, the Gold Reserve Act established the first gold standard for the dollar. The Federal Reserve, which is responsible for setting monetary policy in the United States, buys and sells government bonds to control the amount of money in circulation. In fact, the United States dollar is the most widely traded currency in the world. Well, that may have been true in the past, but nowadays there's several other countries that have stronger economies than the United States. It's also important to consider the political stability of the United States and its institutions. There are a number of challenges that could cause the dollar to lose value. For example, if the United States government starts printing more money, this could cause inflation and cause the value of the dollar to fall. Additionally, if the United States economy slows down, this could make the dollar less attractive to investors and cause its value to fall as well. However, these are just predictions, and only time will tell how the dollar will fare in the coming years. For example, although the U.S. economy has slowed down in recent years, the dollar has remained strong until then. Remember to subscribe so you don't miss out on any of our videos. Thank you for watching. Because investors have been reassured by the stability of the U.S. government and its commitment to fiscal responsibility. Additionally, the United States has a deep and liquid financial markets, which makes it easy for investors to convert their money into dollars. The United States also has a large and growing population, which means that there is a lot of demand for goods and services. This makes the United States a good place to invest, and it helps to keep the dollar strong. For example, China's GDP is now about twice that of the United States, and it is expected to overtake the United States in terms of purchasing power parity within the next decade. But despite this, the Chinese yuan remains a relatively weak currency compared to the dollar. So what gives? And although it has faced stiff competition from other major currencies like the euro and the pound sterling, it remains the dominant force in international finance. When the economy is slowing down, the Fed will buy bonds, which puts more money into circulation and can cause the value of the dollar to fall. When the economy is growing too quickly, the Fed will sell bonds, which takes money out of circulation and can cause the value of the dollar to rise. This act required the government to maintain a gold reserve of at least $400 million. The idea was that if the government had enough gold to back up its currency, then it would be more likely to maintain a stable value. The gold standard worked relatively well for a number of years, but it was eventually undermined by the Great Depression. As the economy began to decline, people lost faith in the banking system and began hoarding gold. This caused the price of gold to rise, which made it more expensive for the government to maintain the gold standard. Eventually, the United States abandoned the gold standard in 1933. According to this system, every dollar was divided into 100 units called cents. In the early years of the Republic, the value of the dollar was tied to the value of gold and silver. This meant that the government had to have a lot of gold and silver on hand to back up the currency that was in circulation. This was a problem during the Civil War. When the Union needed a lot of money to pay for the war effort, the government began printing more paper money. But because it couldn't back it up with enough gold and silver, the value of the dollar began to decline. By the end of the war, It took $150 to buy the same thing that could be purchased with $1 before the war began. This was a big change from the old system where the dollar was divided into 100 units called reals, which were further subdivided into bits, farthings, and cents. The decimal system made it much easier to do business and trade, and so it's still being used today. In the meantime, paper currency continued to be issued by the state. But because each state issued its own currency, it became very difficult to do business across state lines. In addition, counterfeiting was rampant, so the need for a national currency became more and more apparent. Not necessarily. After all, the United States wasn't built on sound fiscal policy, but rather on revolution and ideals. This resulted in a currency that was not only confusing, but also unworkable. Many people thought it looked too much like the Spanish dollar sign or the British pound sign, and they preferred to use the words dollars instead. However, over time, the dollar sign became more widely accepted. For example, the unit of currency was called a dollar, but it was subdivided into units called reals, bits, farthings, and cents. Now, the dollar itself was based on the Spanish silver dollar, which had been widely accepted throughout the colonies even before the Revolution. At the time, the Spanish dollar was worth about 37 cents in today's money. So the Continental Congress decided to keep the dollar but changed the subdivisions to be more in line with the decimal system that was already in use in Europe. So it established the dollar as equal to 100 cents. Well, eventually, on April of 1785, the Continental Congress passed an act establishing the dollar as the official currency of the United States of America. But this isn't exactly how the dollar came to be. In fact, the primary reason that the American Revolution happened in the first place was because the colonists felt that they were being unfairly taxed by the British government, who saw their money printing press as a way to fund the empire and pay off war, debts incurred from fighting the French and Indian War. The colonists felt that they had no voice in this, and so rebelled against the crowns. You would think that when it came time for the newly formed United States to establish its own currency, they would have been very careful about how this was done. You see, the first issue of currency by the federal government after independence was actually a mishmash of different currencies that were based on other systems, namely the Spanish real. Now, the first coins issued by the United States were actually a mix of old Spanish coins along with some British coins that were melted down and then restruck with a new design. In 1792, the Coinage Act established the United States Mint and set the standard for coins that would become known around the world as American silver coins. Now, while the dollar sign may seem ubiquitous now, when it was first introduced, it wasn't very popular. Now, if you're enjoying this video, I'd invite you to subscribe. All right, now let's get back to the story. After the Civil War, the government began to take steps to stabilize the value of the dollar. Since then, the value of the dollar has been determined by the laws of supply and demand. So there you have it, a brief overview of the humble beginnings of the dollar and how it evolved into the global currency we know today. Now, if you're thinking, well, yeah, but the United States has the best economy in the world, that's why its currency is so strong. Well, part of the reason that the dollar is still so strong is because it has not just the strength of the U.S. economy that matters. And speaking of the future, I'm hoping that you'll stick around and join us again tomorrow for another exciting episode.